Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Pam Deutsch, and I'm a VP and executive producer here at ID. My team is responsible for helping to create the shows that you see each and every day. And I'm so grateful to be here in my home with you tonight. And I hope you're enjoying our very first virtual IDCon. At ID, I oversee the editorial of shows about all sorts of crimes. But there are certain cases, the headline grabbers, the too shocking to be true, that I can't ever let go of, and I'm pretty sure the ID addicts agree. These are the cases that get under your skin, and when you think you've heard it all, there's always some new kernel of information and the conversation just begins again. We're going to take a look at two of these iconic cases tonight, and I've invited some friends to help me take that deep dive. Nationally known psychotherapist and award contributor to the hit ID show Scorned. You can find her today on her Facebook watch show Talking Live. Please welcome Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Dr. Robbie, how are you? How are you faring?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. I have brown roots and I've never done so much cooking and cleaning, but everyone in my house is alive still, so I consider that a win.
Yes. Amen to that. I've never unloaded the dishwasher so many times in a week. So let's just jump right in. The first case we're going to look at is a name that is recognizable to all of us, especially if you're a fan of very iconic film Clueless. Hollywood was really rocked when they heard about the death of actress Brittany Murphy, and the circumstances around her death are so tragic, and there's still so many questions that remain. She did have a lot of very high-profile relationships with co-stars, but she ended up with sort of an unlikely partner in the end. Dr. Robbie, tell us a little bit about her husband, Simon Monjack.
Simon, by his own mother's description, had a very hard time distinguishing fantasy from reality. And he was somebody who had some talent, but he would basically lie about who he was. And he met Brittany, and really this was his dream girl, his fantasy girl. And finally, when he was able to marry her, he really, it was almost like two people who had problems coming together and creating a toxic mix. That's exactly what happened. Brittany was somebody who was looking for a father figure, really didn't have any parental, I guess it was parental influence in her life. And she was looking for that person who could really take over and take charge. The problem is that Simon had this idea that they would be this Hollywood it couple. And Hollywood can be a very dark place, and it turned out to be not the case. And they were criticized. And that created a lot of problems. Neither one of them really had the coping skills to deal with the critique that they were getting. And it ended up in both of them dying.
Dr. Robbie, maybe you have some insight into this. What does this tell you about, sort of Brittany and maybe her relationship with her father? Was she looking for a father figure in Simon? And what's going on there?
Yeah, and Brittany had poor judgment, and they were both drawn to this man, Simon. Simon's judgment wasn't good, and I think in part Brittany choosing him probably ruined her career. Yeah. What's so interesting is that after she died, Simon brought cameras into the house to kind of show this chaos and talk about her death and talk about their relationship. And it just seems so strange, but if you really think about it, I think to Simon, he really put Brittany on a pedestal and felt that she did not get her due. So to him, showcasing where she lived was almost like the Marilyn Monroe moment. He thought she would be like Marilyn Monroe or Elvis. The home would be somehow a museum to her life. And if she couldn't get respect, in Hollywood while she was living, then he was going to help her get respect in her death.
And now I'd like to turn to a case that's truly captured national attention, Jeffrey Epstein. This is our most current and has so many layers. We have a truly riveting 3-part special airing on May 31st that takes a look at each and every angle. But let's jump in. Dr. Robbie, there is so much talk when it comes to Epstein's proclivities and insecurities, his narcissistic behavior and his penchant for young women. In your professional opinion, how would you describe Epstein and his pathology?
Well, I certainly think he was a sociopath, and all sociopaths are narcissists. But I think it's a little bit more complex than that. He skipped many grades. He wasn't particularly good looking when he was younger. So I think socially, he was always out of sync with his peer group. And I think in some cases it left a trauma. So when he became very wealthy, and in New York City, when you're very wealthy like he was, it's considered a character asset, and you can get a lot of what you want. And he was finally able to create this fiefdom and this harem of women where he could act out his sexual fantasies and have other people help him act out those sexual fantasies.
Yeah.
But when I look at him, interestingly enough, I think it's less about the women. I think in his mind, he was 16. And so he was drawn to 16-year-old women. I think that's where the trauma was, and that's where he was emotionally stuck. But he's like a frat boy, almost showing off to these other powerful men how great he is. So it's almost like he's really developmentally stunted, but he was very damaging in the process because of his wealth and what he was able to cover up and create for himself.
There's one sort of interesting little tidbit in our special that is revealed in victim testimony, and it actually reminded me a little bit of testimony that we heard in the Weinstein case, and that really is about Epstein and his disfigured genitals. And so, of course, this one is going to you, Dr. Robbie.
Yeah.
What do we make of this? Is this something that might have led to, their pathology or behavior?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we know that penises and penis size has a big impact on how men experience themselves. But I think Jeffrey Epstein really considered himself off in some way, and he was awkward. I mean, even his lifestyle, everything happened in his home. He didn't want to go to restaurants. He didn't want to shake people's hands. And again, I think that these women that he was with, he was psychologically 16, trying to live out this fantasy so he could feel like he was a real successful guy. And perhaps when he was caught, that's what contributed to the suicidality. I don't know whether he committed suicide or not, or if the people around him allowed him to kill himself when the party was over. But this is somebody who had some serious conflicts, and I'm sure that didn't help if that is in fact the case. And there's a lot of self-blame too psychologically. So a lot of young teens who find themselves in this situation will blame themselves. Why didn't I know better? Why didn't I protect myself? Why was I enamored with this person? Am I to blame for my situation in being raped? Should I have known to protect myself? So there's a lot of self-bashing that goes on, which also makes it hard to admit and come out and tell the story.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So to sort of wrap it all up, what happens with the victims? Do they get closure, justice? Where do they go from here?
There's no such thing as closure, by the way. No, there's not.
Yeah, I think there's this fantasy that somehow the justice system resolves emotional harm, and it doesn't really work that way. We like to think it does. But really, if they are looking to get some psychological closure, that's going to have to come from themselves and working in treatment. It could never come from Jeffrey, and it can't even come with a big payout. That's something they would need to work through.
I just want to thank my amazing panelists, Ashley Banfield, Diane Diamond, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. We are so happy to have you on ID and here with us tonight.